I walked into my own store and got pepper sprayed in the face. No greeting, no questions, no hesitation, just a burning inferno of regret straight to my eyes. 1 second, I was checking a product on the shelf, minding my own business. The next, a wild-eyed manager screeched, "Thief!" before unleashing a blinding storm of chemical hell. My world exploded into fire. I hit the ground, clawing at my face, gasping for air, my brain barely processing what just happened. Employees and customers froze in shock, some even gasping. I could hear the stunned murmurs, the panic, the frantic rustling of footsteps as someone shouted for help. But above it all, I heard the voice of my assailant, my own employee, standing above me, self-righteous and smug. "I caught you red-handed, you lowlife," she spat. "Stealing from my store. You really thought you'd get away with it?" It took every ounce of willpower not to yell back through the searing pain, but my body was too busy processing the nuclear meltdown in my eyeballs. Someone poured water on my face, trying to help, but it barely did anything. My throat burned, my nose felt like it had been set on fire, and my vision blurred into a red-hot haze. A hand grabbed my arm, one of my more senior managers, someone who actually knew who I was. "Boss, are you okay?" he asked, his voice tight with panic. "What the hell just happened?" But before I could even answer, my personal tormentor scoffed. "Boss," she sneered. "Oh please. He's a filthy shoplifter. I watched him shove merchandise into his coat with my own eyes." I could hear my best friend and business partner groan somewhere nearby. "Karen, you just maced the owner of this store," he said, his tone a mix of disbelief and exasperation. There was a beat of silence. Then laughter, genuine, cruel laughter, from the very person who had just turned my face into a chemical war zone. "Oh, shut up," she scoffed. "I've spoken to the owner before. He's some weird hermit who never leaves his house. No way this thief is him." At that moment, I knew 2 things. 1. I had hired an absolute menace. 2. I was about to enjoy the most satisfying moment of my life. Even through the pain, I felt a slow, simmering satisfaction bubbling beneath the agony. Because in just a few minutes, reality was going to crash down on this woman like an avalanche of karmic justice. But first, I had to deal with the fact that I still couldn't see a damn thing. Someone handed me a bottle of milk, and I splashed it over my face, gasping as the burning dulled just slightly. "Call the police," I rasped. "Now." Karen scoffed again, crossing her arms. "Oh, don't even try it. I was protecting this business. I did what any good manager should do," she declared, hands on her hips, looking around for validation. The crowd of employees and customers, however, remained dead silent. My friend, who had just moments ago been helping me recover, turned to face her fully. "Yeah, protecting the business by assaulting the person who pays your salary," he said dryly. "Solid work, Karen. Really top-tier decision-making." Her expression faltered, just slightly, but she quickly masked it with another glare. "You're all idiots if you believe him," she scoffed. "He was stealing." By then, the cops were already pulling up outside. Someone must have called them the moment the chaos started. 2 officers stepped inside, taking one look at the situation, me, still dripping in milk, eyes swollen and red, Karen standing there smugly, and immediately asked, "What the hell happened here?" Karen, ever the opportunist, wasted no time. "Officer," she gasped, flipping into full dramatic victim mode. "I caught this man stealing from our store. When I confronted him, he got aggressive. I had no choice but to defend myself." The officer looked at me, looked at her, then at my friend. "Is this true?" I let out a low, pained chuckle, finally regaining enough of my voice to talk properly. "No," I said, my voice hoarse but firm. "I was removing a recalled product from the shelf. She attacked me without warning. And by the way, I own this store." The silence was deafening. Karen blinked. Once, twice. Then burst into laughter again, as if the very idea was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. "Yeah, right," she snorted. "The owner is some pathetic shut-in. Not this guy. My business partner rolled his eyes, already pulling out his phone. You want proof? He asked, tapping a few times before holding it up. The officers leaned in, glancing at the screen. Whatever they saw was enough to make them nod in understanding. All right, one of them said, turning back to Karen. You're under arrest for assault? Karen's confidence shattered in an instant. What? She shrieked, stumbling back. You can't be serious. I was doing my job. He was stealing. He's not the owner. I wiped my face again, finally managing to open my eyes just enough to look at her properly. Karen, I said, my voice as steady as I could manage. You're fired? Her jaw dropped. You can't fire me. I smirked through the pain. I can. And I just did. The officers wasted no time slapping handcuffs onto her wrists. She shrieked, cursed, flailed, but it didn't matter. Reality had finally caught up with her. As they dragged her toward the door, she turned back, wild-eyed and furious. You'll hear from my lawyer, she spat. I'll OW in this store when I'm done with you. I let out a slow, exhausted sigh. Yeah, I muttered. Good luck with that. The police officers barely got Karen out the door before she started screaming again, this time at the nearest camera crew that had just arrived from a local news station, drawn in by the commotion. Apparently, some customer in the store had been live-streaming the entire ordeal, and within minutes, the story had already begun spreading online. I was protecting my workplace from a thief. This is discrimination, she wailed as she was shoved into the squad car, still thrashing like a fish out of water. I stood just inside the doorway, my eyes still raw, my patience barely holding together, and watched the spectacle unfold. My business partner, ever the problem solver, was already on his phone handling damage control with corporate and legal. You all right? He asked, glancing over at me as I wiped another handful of milk and water off my face. I let out a humorless chuckle, still feeling the sting in my eyes. I just got maced in my own damn store, man, I muttered. No, I'm not all right. But give me a few hours and a bottle of whiskey, and maybe I'll get there. He sighed, nodding in understanding, before turning to one of the senior employees. Lock down all security footage from today, he instructed. Make sure HR is ready because you know she's gonna try something. The employees, still visibly shaken, hesitated to return to work. Some were murmuring among themselves, others were outright staring at me like they had just watched a soap opera unfold in real time. One younger employee, barely out of college, nervously approached. Sir. I didn't know you were the owner, he stammered. We all just thought you were, like, some investor or something. Karen always said the owner was just some rich dude who never cared about what happened here. I exhaled sharply, resisting the urge to laugh despite how much my eyes burned. Well, now you know, I replied. And trust me, I care a lot more than she ever did. He nodded quickly and scurried off, likely trying to process the fact that he had just witnessed his boss get assaulted by his own manager. As expected, the incident caused an immediate uproar. Customers were rattled, and while some left, others stuck around, whispering excitedly about the drama. A few had even taken out their phones, no doubt already composing their own posts for social media. The Karen had been let out in cuffs, but the chaos she left behind remained. My best friend, ever the voice of reason, took control and started reassuring customers while also discreetly handing out discount coupons to keep them from turning this into an even bigger PR nightmare. Meanwhile, I was still trying to keep my vision clear, shaking my head in disbelief. I cannot believe she thought she could get away with that, I muttered. I mean, I can, but still. My friend gave me a knowing smirk. You hired her, dude? I groaned. Don't remind me. Just when I thought the worst of it was over, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and barely stopped myself from cursing out loud. It was my lawyer. Oh great, this can't be good, I muttered before answering. Tell me you don't already have news, I said by way of greeting. My lawyer sighed on the other end. Well, that depends. If you were hoping Karen was going to make this easy, Then I've got bad news. She's already trying to sue you. I rubbed my temple, feeling an oncoming headache join the lingering burn of the pepper spray. Of course she is. What's her angle? My lawyer snorted. Claims wrongful termination, says she was just trying to protect the store, and, wait for it, she's also pulling the discrimination card. Says she was targeted unfairly and that firing her was retaliation. I stared blankly at the floor, barely believing what I was hearing. She pepper-sprayed me in the face. On camera. In front of an entire crowd of witnesses. How exactly does she think that's going to hold up in court? My lawyer chuckled dryly. She probably doesn't. But she's banking on making enough noise that you'll want to settle just to shut her up. I shook my head, already feeling my frustration mounting again. Yeah, not happening, I said firmly. She wants to drag this into court? Fine. But she's not getting a single cent from me. As if things couldn't get any worse, just as I hung up the phone, my friend nudged me and nodded toward the entrance of the store. I turned to look, and sure enough, standing outside, talking animatedly to a camera crew, was Karen herself, still in cuffs, still shouting about how she was the real victim here. Oh, for the love of, I groaned. My friend just smirked. Better get used to it. This is gonna be a circus. The news coverage exploded faster than I could have ever imagined. By the time I made it home that evening, my phone was vibrating nonstop with messages, missed calls, and notifications from social media. Apparently, the footage of my own employee pepper-spraying me had gone viral. News outlets picked it up, online forums were dissecting it, and Karen, in all her delusional glory, had already done an impromptu interview outside the police station, claiming she was being persecuted for simply doing her job. She was on camera, screaming about how I was a fraudster who had tricked his way into the business and how she had single-handedly saved the store from criminals. The sheer absurdity of it almost made me laugh if I weren't still dealing with the lingering burn in my eyes. My lawyer had warned me she'd try to turn this into a circus, but I had underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go to double down on her self-inflicted disaster. It would have been amusing if it wasn't my name being dragged through the mud. Just as I settled down with an ice pack over my face, my phone buzzed again, this time with a call from corporate. I let out a deep sigh before answering, already bracing myself for the conversation. So, came the exasperated voice on the other end. Do I even want to ask what the hell happened today? I sighed. Short version? One of my managers maced me, accused me of stealing, got arrested, and is now trying to sue me while simultaneously running a PR campaign claiming she's the victim. A long silence followed before corporate let out a slow, incredulous laugh. Well, that's a new one, I groaned. Tell me about it. What's the damage? There was some shuffling on the other end before the voice returned. Customers are eating this up. Some people are outraged on your behalf. Others think it's a setup like some kind of PR stunt. But the good news? Sales at your store just spiked. Apparently, people want to come shop at the place where the owner got maced. I blinked, momentarily thrown off by that. Wait, so you're telling me this disaster actually helped business? Corporate chuckled. Only in the weirdest way possible. But yes, people love a scandal, and now they're curious. So, congratulations? I guess. I rubbed my temple. Great. Glad my personal suffering is entertaining the masses. My lawyer had warned me about this possibility too, that the entire mess would take on a life of its own. And sure enough, by the next morning, memes were circulating about Macegate. People were making parody videos reenacting the incident, and even late-night talk shows had picked up the story. Some YouTubers had already made deep dives into Karen's social media, digging up old posts that revealed she had a long history of aggressive, self-righteous behavior. One post in particular stood out, a rant about how employees should be able to take justice into their own hands if they think someone is stealing. That alone torpedoed any credibility she had left. But Karen, true to form, refused to back down. Despite being fired, despite the lawsuit hanging over her head, Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, she doubled down on her victim complex. She went on a rant during her court hearing, claiming that she was set up and that this was all part of a conspiracy to get rid of her. When the judge pointed out that she was caught on multiple cameras attacking someone without provocation, she threw an absolute fit in the courtroom. Reports said she had to be escorted out after causing a disruption. My lawyer had been right. She wasn't trying to win the case. She was trying to make as much noise as possible, hoping to either guilt me into a settlement or drum up enough public support to pressure me into dropping charges. Unfortunately for her, neither was going to happen. While she flailed and screamed about injustice, I made sure every step of the legal process was airtight. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every security clip was stacked against her. Meanwhile, my business partner made sure the store's reputation stayed intact, running promotional events that played into the absurdity of the situation. We even had a mace-free shopping experience sale, which customers found hilarious. By the end of the week, the entire thing had become a running joke, and Karen was nothing more than a fading headline. The last I heard of her, she was desperately trying to start a GoFundMe to cover her legal fees, claiming she had been unjustly persecuted by the corporate elite. The kicker? No one donated. It turned out people had far more fun watching her downfall than they did supporting her nonsense. As for me, I walked away with a valuable lesson: never underestimate the stupidity of a self-proclaimed authority figure with an overinflated ego. But more importantly, never, under any circumstances, walk into my own store without a damn pair of protective goggles again. Just when I thought the madness was finally over, Karen somehow managed to find a way to drag herself back into the spotlight. Even after losing the court case, being publicly humiliated, and becoming a walking meme, she refused to go down quietly. She was like a cockroach in a nuclear apocalypse. No matter how much you tried to get rid of her, she kept finding a way to crawl back into the mess she had created. Her latest attempt at salvaging whatever scraps of dignity she had left came in the form of a bizarre, last-ditch effort to rally supporters for her cause. Apparently, she had convinced herself that she had been wrongfully terminated and had the audacity to organize a protest in front of my store. When I got the call about it, I nearly choked on my coffee. "You're joking," I said flatly, staring at my business partner, who was holding up his phone with an expression that was somewhere between amusement and exasperation. "I wish I was," he replied, shaking his head. "But no. She's out there right now, standing with a bunch of homemade signs, shouting about worker injustice." I sighed, rubbing my temple. "How many people?" He snorted. "3. And one of them is her cousin." I had to see this for myself. So, against my better judgment, I went down to the store, taking the back entrance just in case Karen spotted me. When I peeked through the window, the sight was even more pathetic than I had imagined. There she was, standing on the sidewalk, waving a poorly written sign that said "Justice for Karen" while screaming about how she had been oppressed by the evil corporate overlords. Her cousin stood beside her, looking thoroughly embarrassed, while some random guy she must have bribed with gas money half-heartedly held up a sign that just said Karen was right in uneven, rushed handwriting. Meanwhile, customers were walking right past them, either laughing or completely ignoring them altogether. One guy even took a selfie with Karen in the background and posted it online with the caption, "Live footage of the most unsuccessful protest in history." I debated for a second whether I should just ignore the whole thing, but then Karen spotted one of my employees and went ballistic. "You're all brainwashed," she shrieked at a poor cashier who had just been on their way to work. "Don't you see? This place is corrupt. You should all quit in protest." The cashier gave her a blank look and muttered, "I literally just started last week," before walking inside without another word. That should have been the end of it, but Karen, in her never-ending quest for self-sabotage, decided to push her luck even further. She grabbed a megaphone. Where the hell she even got one, I had no idea, and started blasting nonsense at full volume, demanding to speak to the fraudulent owner who had ruined her life. At that point, I'd had enough. I stepped outside, arms crossed, and watched as realization dawned on her face. Her expression twisted into a mix of fury and disbelief. "You," she screeched, pointing at me like she had just seen a ghost. "How dare you show your face here after what you did to me?" I sighed dramatically, shaking my head. "Karen, you're standing outside my store, yelling through a megaphone, holding a sign with your own name on it. Do you even hear yourself?" She fumed, her face turning red. "I was wrongfully fired. This is an act of oppression. I have rights." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? And so do my customers. Like the right to shop in peace without getting their eardrums blown out by a woman who lost a court case so badly the judge told her to sit down mid-sentence." That one hit a nerve. She practically vibrated with rage, her grip tightening on the megaphone like she was about to hurl it at my face. Before she could make another terrible life decision, one of the officers who had arrested her the first time appeared around the corner, arms crossed. "Karen," he said in that tired, already done with this tone. "We talked about this. You're trespassing again." Her entire demeanor flipped in an instant. "Officer, thank God you're here," she gasped, putting on her best fake victim act. "This man is harassing me. I'm trying to protest peacefully, and he's threatening me." The officer didn't even blink. "Karen, this is private property. You were already warned. If you don't leave now, we're going to have to arrest you again." The moment those words left his mouth, Karen's entire bravado crumbled. But I have rights," she sputtered. The officer sighed. "Yeah, you do. And you also have a criminal record now. So your choices are to leave, or spend the night in a cell." I've never seen someone deflate so fast in my life. With all the enthusiasm of a child being dragged away from a toy store, she stomped her foot, muttered something under her breath, and finally, mercifully, left. Her cousin bolted after her, practically speed-walking to avoid further embarrassment. The third guy, the one with the terrible sign, just shrugged, tossed his sign in the trash, and walked off like none of this had anything to do with him. And just like that, Karen was gone. Again. My business partner walked up beside me, shaking his head in amazement. "You think that's the last we'll hear from her?" he asked. I let out a long, exhausted sigh, watching as the last trace of Karen disappeared down the street. "Honestly," I muttered, "I give it 2 weeks.